Hello, America. This is Robert Reese with my co-host Joe Brusuelis on the Middle Market Transformative CEO Show. And our guest today is Sharon John, who's the CEO of the beloved Build-A-Bear. How are you, Sharon?
Very good. Thank you so much, Robert.
And we're going to talk about Build-A-Bear's model. But before we do, Joe, could you give a definition of what the middle market is?
Sure. There's 200,000 small and medium-sized businesses out there that have revenues between 10 million and 2 billion. They account for 40% of all U.S. GDP, which is a non-trivial amount, and they employ 1/3 of the entire U.S. labor force. Essentially, that's the beating heart and soul of the United States economy.
So we're here with a classic middle market company, Build-A-Bear, founded in 1996, 1997. You took over as CEO in 2013. Talk about what the brand of Build-A-Bear is and what the experience was like of taking over from an actual founder of a company.
Yes, in 2013, the brand had been around for quite a number of years. It's a beloved brand, and it was exciting to have the opportunity because it had such a high brand awareness, well over 90% brand awareness. But the business side had struggled for some years in that it had some contracting sales, 8 years of negative comps, some struggling profitability. 22% of the stores in North America were actually unprofitable at that time. So we had some goals, clearly, one, to return to profitability very quickly, and at the same time, while understanding that we needed to find a way to reinvigorate the brand while rebuilding some of the infrastructure that had been somewhat ignored for reasons that you can understand during the 8 years of struggle. So we went about the process by closing some unprofitable doors and improving some of our SG&A, selling general and administrative costs, getting a little more tactical about some of the strategies that we needed to do, and we did return to profitability in that first year. The most difficult part of that in some ways was getting the organization to understand the need for change.
So how did you go about doing that? How did you get the organization to understand that change was needed?
Right. So one of the interesting things about organizations and companies that need to transform is that oftentimes, particularly when they've had some success in the past, often there's a misinterpretation of what is needed. Often there's a belief that they need to return to what they were doing during the time that they were very successful, even if the environment had changed. So it was a process of creating the classic approach to change management with this particular team, and that we needed to create a vision of the future that they could understand and express that vision to them in a very clear way, then followed by the steps to get there. This particular vision was grounded in the power and the love of the brand. The company absolutely adored the brand. The people were emotionally engaged with the corporation because of the power of the brand. So if you could communicate, which we were successful in doing, the very need to change given the past. Sometimes struggle is a great catalyst for change if you know how to use it. That if you straight line what we've been doing the last 8 years, this isn't going to turn out that well. So go with me for a moment that change is necessary. And once you get a few nods, you take something that you know they love, like the brand, and paint this vision of we can be more than we ever were. If we can understand that this brand has this enormous equity tied up in ideas like affinity toward the brand, which is as high as some of companies that are many times the size of us. And if we can take that brand and monetize it in ways beyond just retail, that we can have different levels of success in a different type of company, be a transformed company, but it will ultimately be, in our goal, a much more successful company in the long run.
So I want to key in on that word transform, because you clearly transformed your company. And you mentioned the vision of the future. Where's Build-A-Bear going to be in 5, 7, or 10 years? How are you setting up to navigate the great transformation that's upon us?
Well, of course, it's very difficult to predict the future in this particular market, particularly on the retail side. If you have to think about, one of the lesser areas that I believe people have been able to understand change, it probably is retail right now and what it's going to look like in the next 3 to 5 years. So we're thinking of it in a different way. We're thinking of it as retail is one of our revenue streams. And what we needed to do over these past 5 years is, one, as I mentioned, rebuild that infrastructure piece so that we can operate in the sort of the normal scope of today's IT and business structure, and put enough infrastructure under us to actually be able to scale when the time is right. Become very profitable in that singular revenue stream of retail, because well-run vertical, particularly with no debt, which we have no debt, throws off a decent amount of cash that could be reinvested in the creation of other revenue streams that monetize the equity of the brand. Those revenue streams being the reinvention of our outbound licensing business, which takes the brand into new categories and new places, the reinvestment in our international franchising business, which we just signed China to our roster. Now that we have Germany, South Africa, Mexico, a number of different markets. China, of course, is one of the largest, as we know, second largest economy in the world right now, up and coming middle class. That through our testing, very well versed in what the concept of Build-A-Bear is in terms of the feedback from research says that the consumers will love the Build-A-Bear process for their children. And hopefully, as we start to evolve in the entertainment side, you can imagine a brand with the type of affinity that we have, that it could be more stretchable than the vertical.
So as I travel around the North American economy and I talk to middle market CEOs, China's sort of the undiscovered country, right? Shakespeare's undiscovered country. Take us through the run-up to trying to enter that market and then try to be successful in that market, because I think a lot of middle market CEOs are thinking about how they're going to do this over the next decade.
Right. China is clearly a very large market that now has enough of a middle class and a growing middle class to support a brand like a Build-A-Bear, not something we would call a luxury brand, but a reach brand, a premium brand. And we believe that from a market timing perspective that it was right. We did enter the market in an interesting way, though. We entered it with one of our partners, Disney. And because we have had a long-standing relationship either through retail or through outbound licensing, and we tested out the environment by building a Build-A-Bear inside of the Disney Shanghai park, which gave us a great toehold into the market to determine what we did right, what we did wrong, what the market would respond to. The research that we had done that I mentioned really did hold strong to some of the insights that we'd had, but sometimes it's very difficult to know exactly what to do until you get directly into the market. What was really fascinating about that, and what we had actually hoped for in figuring out, if you will, how to operate in that market, was we had the exposure to a lot of best-in-class potential franchise partners, because we were there in, of course, the Shanghai market, in the Disney environment that was had a lot of eyes on that particular endeavor, of course. And that allowed us to find a great partner in China and start to roll out last year. So now they're doing better than planned, and we're very excited as they start to extend their rollout plans.
You've about a minute and a half before break. Let's talk about the word licensing. You really changed what Build-A-Bear was doing and expanded the licensing. What have you learned about licensing from what you've done, and what advice do you have to CEOs who could license?
Well, one of the good things about both franchising and licensing for a mid-market company or a small company is that depending on how you organize, it can be very margin accretive and with low capital requirements and actually low SG&A. You can find partners to help you do this. We actually run our franchise business, but we have a partner that helps us with outbound licensing. Licensing done well, where you really get a good structure around what your brand means to a consumer. And we believe that we mean not just bears, not just furry friends, but we mean heart and fun and creativity. Allows you to go into a number of new categories with the brand, allowing the consumer to experience the brand in different ways. And that also puts you into different types of retailers raising the overall top-of-mind awareness for the brand.
There you have it. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk more with Sharon John, and we'll talk about trends in retail. Back in a few. Hi, this is Robert Reese and Joe Bersuelis, and we are here on the Middle Market Transformative CEO Show, back with Sharon John, the CEO of Build-A-Bear. And let's find out, retail is probably one of the toughest segments to be in today, and you've still had great success in your expansions. Talk about what you see as the trends of how retail will change.
Yeah, so hearkening back to a little bit of the earlier discussion, when I came to Build-A-Bear back in 2013, we knew we had some challenges, certainly signed up for the returning the company to the profitability challenge, rebuilding a lot of the infrastructure challenge. What I can't say that I totally signed up for was the turmoil of retail that has been enduring for the last 5 years, if you will, in that in some studies you can see up to 40, maybe 50% of a decrease in mall traffic over that cume time period. That's been a difficult process for any retailer to sort of figure out how to continue to thrive in that environment. What we have learned is that it's not a simple situation. Just like a turnaround's never a simple situation. There's hardly ever a silver bullet. If there had been one, you usually don't have a change in management, for example. So we've looked at it a lot of different ways. Is it the mall retailers? Is it other locations? What's the struggle and where are we going to go? The truth of the matter is not all malls act alike. Not all retail environments act alike. And in certain malls, Build-A-Bear will have a wonderful place there. There's going to be contraction in malls, I believe, without a doubt. The situation will be, though, that as some of those malls contract, they're generally in markets that have more than one mall. So it's likely that other malls may be of benefit as some of the malls contract, particularly as those malls and certain mall landlords start to reinvent themselves for the new marketplace. Being more experiential, which we were from the beginning, which has been terrific for us, servicing different types of things, more restaurants, more opportunity for people to get engaged and to have demonstrations and things where people really want to get out and do things that aren't necessarily things that you can do with your phone or in front of a computer. So we feel like that we're perfectly poised for that. We're structuring our retail environment, looking at things that are more tourist location environments or things where these malls that are likely going to reinvent. We're also reinventing a new type of retail for ourselves. We've recently launched a Build-A-Bear Bake Shop, and we'll be rolling out a second bake shop in Mall of America soon.
So, I think that retail's often talked about as if it's the redheaded stepchild. And apologies to the redheaded stepchildren out there. Make the case for retail. Tell our audience just how critical it is.
From an economic perspective, clearly retail is very, very important. Not only do we service hundreds of millions of Americans from a retail perspective, but we're also a great employer of Americans, and it's in a segment that's much needed for people to sustain and maintain employment in a great place. I mean, you may know that Build-A-Bear's been on the best places to work list for many years in a row, almost a decade running. And so not only are we helping people maintain their families and their livelihood, but we're also making children smile and making our employees happy at the same time. I think that is of great service. And I think that in the end of the day, it's difficult to imagine an environment where you straight line some of the situations that have been happening in the past 5 years, thinking that we'll never go out and see each other and shop and flip through clothing rack,
right,
or have an experience with our children or go out to eat. I'm not sure that's going to be the future.
Let's dig deeper into that, right? We have a $14 trillion consumer market in the United States. Who is the Build-A-Bear consumer? Well,
the Build-A-Bear consumer is kids and kids at heart.
Okay.
So you might be surprised that 20% of our consumer base is people over 12 years old that are coming in for more of an affinity experience, something with maybe as our licensed products like a Star Wars product. So we are Pokemon. We have a lot of 20-somethings that like to come to Build-A-Bear, but our consumer is, a slightly it's a college-educated mom generally, and slightly a little bit better off than the average, but that may be more because they come often. Build-A-Bear, though, is accessible in that even a broad range of consumers can participate in Build-A-Bear and have that one birthday or couple, or have a number of Build-A-Bears and make that very special moment in their life. Much of our research tells us that Build-A-Bear is practically synonymous with childhood, with almost a third of our transactions being grounded in birthdays or birthday parties. So I love that when you wake a child up on their 5th birthday or their 6th birthday of that morning and you get the, what do you want to do today? Millions of times a year the answer is go to Build-A-Bear.
That's exciting. And anyone wants to have a beloved brand. In all the years I've known you, Sharon, one discipline you've always been very strong at is strategy. Also design, that not everyone knows you are a world-class designer. But let's talk about strategy. And what is your process in developing strategy and envisioning what the future would be, developing how you plan the capital expenditures, how you develop the actual vision and strategy of where you're going, and then how you engage your whole employee base in that?
That's a big question, Robert. So I think when you start out trying to assess the best direction to take, you need to do an assessment of where does your value lie? Where do you have the greatest value? And when we did that assessment, and a lot of times management doesn't know that right out of the gate. Sometimes there's a misalignment of where the biggest value lies, and sometimes it's in an intangible. It's not always a warehouse or a factory, which is oftentimes what may come out of someone's mouth of where your greatest value lies. We believed that our greatest value is in the brand. And one of the good ways to think about kind of pressure testing where your value may lie is if you took one thing away, what would be the most critical thing and the hardest thing for you to rebuild your company? Could I rebuild this company without my headquarters? Could I rebuild this company without kid knowledge? Could I rebuild this company without this talent or my supply chain? Yes. Can I rebuild the company if I had to start over from scratch without the Build-A-Bear brand and the intellectual concept behind it? That'd be pretty tough, particularly if you know that the brand, again, is not just about the awareness, but about the affinity that we have. That basically people love Build-A-Bear. It's hard to get to how much value is there. So to me, once you assess where your value lies, you start building out tactical aspects, putting capital behind the tactical aspects that allow you to monetize your most valuable asset, which for us is the brand. And that comes into this place where we're in this pivot process of not just being a brand that was built on the back of a vertical retail idea, that was an experiential retail idea, don't get me wrong, that was extraordinary for its time.
No one had ever done that. Reinvented the customer
Maxine
experience.
Clark did, and reinvented the customer
Maxine
experience.
Clark, the iconic
Yeah, absolutely.
Maxine.
The iconic Maxine Clark, most definitely, our
Love her.
founder. But we're going through a process of pivoting from that, a retailer that almost accidentally built this powerful brand, to a powerful branded company that now just has vertical retail as one of its revenue streams with many other opportunities. That journey of explaining that to people, when people get excited about the future state, is how you create momentum. But it is a bumpy journey. Change and transformation goes up and down. Even if there wasn't retail turmoil, it would still be up and down as the process goes from almost every aspect of the company. There's give and take, there's up and down. It's a bumpy journey.
And there you have it. It is a pleasure having you, Sharon John, on the Middle Market Transformative CEO Show.
Thank you.